What's going on, guys? You're watching Game Taco for the win, and this is the video review for Ratchet and Clank All for One. If you were fortunate enough to have a PlayStation 2, you might know the Ratchet and Clank franchise. Exclusive to Sony systems, I unfortunately did not get the opportunity to experience these critically acclaimed games. Therefore, I didn't really know what I was getting into when I bought All for One. I understand that this is much different, however, than the previous iterations, because instead of being a single-player action-adventure game, it's now sort of like a cooperative shooting spree. The question still remains, though, does it live up to the high standards that fans and critics alike have come to know and love? Well, sort of. I get the feeling that the folks over at Insomniac wanted to change up the formula for Ratchet and Clank, which I totally appreciate. This is a completely different genre, but it does bring tons of local or online co-op gaming to your PlayStation. It sort of reminds me of a party game for when you have some friends over, and in this aspect, the game is more entertaining. However, that might not warrant a purchase because the game overall is underwhelming. The storyline doesn't necessarily help strengthen anything, and it seems more like an afterthought most of the time. I just plain didn't care why I was shooting all these robots, but the important thing to note is that you play as previous characters in the series, and they're now working with each other to save the world and, all that stuff. Among them is Dr. Nefarious, the antagonist from the previous games, and he is now helping Ratchet, Clank, and Quark on their mission to save the world. The only thing the story has going for it, however, is some of the humor in the cutscenes. They might warrant a chuckle or something, but however, there's not much more to that because dialogue and humor can only go so far.
Healthy Hamburger Shack. Its vegan wheatgrass and tree bark burger was a favorite of hipsters everywhere.
The actual gameplay is pretty generic. It kind of reminds me of like a twin-stick shooter, but without using both sticks, if you know what I mean. You control one of the four characters, and you go through some very linear levels, shooting every monster, breaking every crate, and doing some very, very light puzzle solving. There are a lot of enemies, but the problem is that their strategy never changes. You simply hold R1 until they're dead, and then continue on. In fact, most of the game is like this. It's repetitive to a point where I was just simply tired of the game halfway through it. Now, the game is obviously focused on multiplayer, but unfortunately I did not get to experience much of it because I had trouble playing with others online. And there also seemed to be very few people even playing online as well. The thing is, though, that the gameplay does not change depending on how many players are playing. You are still just shooting things until they're dead, walking down the hallway, shoot more things. It's just rinse and repeat. If you play solo, you'll get an AI partner who does work surprisingly well, but the game is obviously more enjoyable when you have other people on the couch next to you. The best part about playing through the game is the weapon designs. Insomniac really knows how to create some interesting weapons and enemy designs. For example, one weapon turns any enemy into a harmless animal, usually like a pig or something. Another gadget lets you summon the guy named Mr. Zircon who says witty things. And another weapon lets you create a doppelganger who taunts the enemies to get their attention. You can also break boxes along the way to find tons of bolts and upgrade the weapons to make them stronger. I never thought I would say this into a game, but there are simply way too many levels in this. Usually I don't mind long games, but when they're padded out in such a repetitive manner, it becomes a problem. All for One's levels are simply way too long and stretched out for me to enjoy. Most of the levels took me nearly an hour to complete, which left me bored for a majority of that time. There are some unique situations, such as where you have to guide a raft through this lake kind of a thing and avoid mines and giant spiky turtles, but my point still stands, the levels are just way too long. It's a shame, really, because everything else in this game is actually kind of good. The set pieces, environments, and character designs are completely awesome. The visual aesthetic has really impressive backgrounds and set pieces that just sometimes left me taking a few seconds just to look at what was going on in the distance. All the stages are unique and offer a new terrain inhabited by new enemies, and there's even new enemies introduced pretty late in the game. The vocals and sound also hold up extremely well. In conclusion, Insomniac's latest experiment leaves a bit to be desired. It's great that they tried something new, but things don't always work out as planned, and sadly this is one of those situations where it simply looks better on paper.
Oh yeah.
The game looks great, sounds great, and has cool weapons, but these alone aren't enough to offset the repetitive nature of the game, the boring storyline, or the long, drawn-out levels. And that's all for Ratchet and Clank All for One. Make sure you check out our website, GameTow.co, for more reviews and other cool things, like free stuff. I know you like free stuff. Also, feel free to hit the subscribe button and check us out on Facebook.